Meu nome é Solange e o vídeo de hoje foi um pedido de um membro nível 2 aqui do canal, que foi para fazer a SMA de leitura em inglês. Então eu fiquei pensando, o que eu posso ler dessa vez? E eu lembrei que eu tenho um livro que eu ganhei 2 natais atrás. E eu ainda não li. Eu voltei a ler mais esse último mês. Peguei todos os livros de papel mesmo que eu tenho em casa para ler. E esse está na fila, ele vai ser o próximo que eu vou ler assim que eu terminar o atual. E então eu pensei em começar a ler ele com vocês. É do Sebastian Felix e se chama The Seventh Son. É engraçado, né? Que a palavra filho, son, a gente pronuncia da mesma maneira que sol, sun, S-U-N, e filho, S-O-N, mas a pronúncia é a mesma para os dois, é sun. Esse livro tem vários reviews positivos, tem do Sunday Times. Folks writes with great emotional authority. O New York Times, a prodigiously talented writer. Sunday Telegraph, the most impressive novelist of his generation. E o Financial Times, Folks is beyond doubt a master. E essa daqui aparentemente é uma versão assinada. Então vamos começar. Quando eu vi o livro pela primeira vez, eu fiquei um pouco impressionada com o tamanho. Eu falei, nossa, vai ser aquele livro longo de ler. Mas tem uma pegadinha, tá? A letra é gigante. A letra eu achei bem grande. E é bom pra ler à noite sem óculos. Eu vou começar lendo o blurb aqui do lado. Eu não faço ideia do que se trata o livro. A child will be born who will change everything. When young American academic Talisa offers to carry another woman's child, she has no idea of the life-changing consequences. Behind the doors of the Parn Institute, a billionaire entrepreneur plans to stretch the boundaries of ethics as never before. Through a series of IVF treatments, which Parn hope to keep secret, they propose an experiment that will upend the human race as we know it. Seth, the baby, is delivered to hopeful parents, Mary and Alaric, but when his differences start to mark him out from his peers, he begins to attract unwanted attention. The Seventh Son's a spectacular examination of what it is to be a human. It asks the question, just because you can do something, does it mean you should? Sweeping between New York, London and the Scottish Highlands, this is an extraordinary novel about unrequited love and unearned power. E tem também um blurb sobre o Sebastian Felix. A foto dele aqui. It is Sebastian Felix has written 19 books, of which A Week in December and The Fatal Englishman were #1 in the Sunday Times bestseller lists. He's best known for Birdsong, part of his French trilogy and Human Traces, the first in an ongoing Austrian trilogy. Before becoming a full-time writer, he worked as a journalist on national papers. He has also written screenplays and has appeared in small roles on stage. He lives in London. Então vamos começar o livro. Parece interessante. Aqui tem a lista de todos os livros que ele já escreveu e a assinatura dele. Eu não conheço nenhum outro livro dele, mas vamos ver se eu gosto desse. Eu geralmente gosto de filmes, de livros de suspense que me deixam assim muito intrigada ou querendo ler o próximo capítulo, porque eu gosto de ler antes de dormir, então. Enfim, tem umas quotes aqui no começo do livro. The proper study of mankind is man. Alexander Pope, an essay on man. The proper study of man is mankind. Anon, 2023. Então a gente começa no Part 1, 2030. Quando esse livro foi escrito? Acho que ele foi escrito em 2003. Se eu não me engano. Eu acho que esse livro foi escrito em 2003. Em 2030 seria quase 30 anos depois. Agora 2030 daqui 5 anos. Então vamos ver. Mas sem mais delongas eu vou começar a leitura. One. Letter for you, Talisa, said the superintendent, holding out an envelope from his desk in the lobby. A letter? Wow, is this the 19th century? Looks important. Sure does, said Talisa. He bore the embossed initials of the body that would decide her future. HLI, the Helen Lingard Institute. Aren't you going to open it? No thanks, Mullen. I prefer to take my bad news alone. I like the boots. They new? You're kidding me. Postdocs don't do new. Talisa pushed open the door onto the avenue, the rattle of the new electric tramway, a smell of tar and burnt chestnuts. As she strode over the big paving slabs, the wind pushed the woolen dress against her thighs and her coat rippled out behind her. She skipped down the subway steps on the first hint of winter rising from the Hudson. Near the study center was a cafe where she sometimes retreated. She ordered more than she could afford: plum compote with yogurt, poached egg, and a pot of dark roasted Colombian. Right, she said softly to herself as she sipped the first of the coffee. Let's go. She pulled open the letter. Dear Talisa Adam, postdoctoral research position. A full complement within the limits of our budget, short of one pair of hands in the ideal cohort. Admire your resume and supporting letters. Guarantee a place if you are able to externally fund your first year, starting in the fall of 2031. The worst. Eu vou tirar essa folha porque ela fica escorregando da minha mão quando eu leio. prefiro muito mais a cor do livro original. She could call her mother for some commiseration, or speak to Felix. She could call her best friend, Susan Kovalenko, but Susan's sympathy might make her cry. It was better to jump down on the disappointment by herself, digest it like a python with a gill. She looked around the cafe, and its bare wooden surfaces. There was a framed photograph of a jazz trumpeter at the foot of the stairs, and a vase of gaudily colored flowers, zinnias perhaps, on the counter. The espresso machine hissed and thunked. Talisa paid, and went across to a small park nearby, a scratch of grass with a struggling green ash. In the corner was a bronze that showed a mother of 2 children, walking away, hand in hand. One child was about 5 years old, light on her feet and confident. The younger one looked new to walking. Talisa thought of the fossilized footsteps discovering the volcanic residue of the Rift Valley in Tanzania, where the trail suggested that a child had at one point been picked up by a parent, perhaps because the ground was too hot on its feet. A plaque said the bronze was a memorial to a steamboat accident long ago, but to Talisa the figures looked like any group of hominids. From the highlands of Uganda to the sidewalks of Manhattan, the hope and duty, the mother doing what she thought was best, but no wiser than the children, who'd placed their hands in hers. Talisa's work made her see all human beings in this way, as primates first, Homo second, and sapiens later, if at all. Sitting on a bench, she wrapped her coat around her. Her PhD had been fully funded. Perhaps she'd been negligent in not planning for what came afterwards. Having been awarded her doctorate, she needed to move on. Her university offered only a long grind towards a tenure that she might in any case not want. She had been intrigued when she read about the Helen Lingard Institute in Boston, a new organization that had been started by 3 people from Caltech with funding from private equity. Their focus was on her area of special interest, the distant but discoverable human past. And now, how was she to find something like the $70,000 that the Lingard offered in its postdocs as a salary? Her mother had enough money to live on and to heat her small apartment in the Bronx, but none left over. Talisa's grandparents had come from 3 different continents, bringing hope and ambition, but nothing in the way of cash. "What are you going to do?" said Felix later, his voice a fraction less emollient than she'd expected. "I don't know. If I can't find a postdoc, I'll have to do some tutoring, or bad work." She leaned forward to pick up her beer glass. "Or I could train as a dancer." "Don't do anything rash. You know how I may have no choice. I saw Arizona State was hiring. Talisa, did you hear?" She smiled. "I'm not answering that." They were nearing the end of dinner in Talisa's apartment. Felix pushed back his chair. "Where's this going to leave our trip to France?" he said. They had planned to visit Brittany and to see the site where, 18 months before, a team had found the skeletons of 6 unusually intact examples of what appeared to be a new human species, Homo vanessiensis. Talisa's interest in the subject had started when she was 8 years old, and her grandma had given her a picture book. It showed people who were heavy-set. Here sat Beijinhos, strolling over grassy plains. At college, she had studied archaeology and anthropology on an undersubscribed course, She was quite happy with the focus of public interest, and big money had been on genomics. Eventually, however, it began to become clear that the mapping of the Homo sapiens code celebrated a triumph of scientific ingenuity, had also revealed just how complicated was the miracle of life that it had rendered legible. They had seen into the mind of God, but found that he moved in an exceedingly mysterious ways. By the time Talisa was in high school, the public hunger for novelty had already started to look elsewhere, eventually finding what he wanted in the discovery of some new, or rather very old, humans, who seemed, when resembled and genetically sequenced, to have been much like the modern family next door. H-Sap was a bit of a mongrel. It was established, having mated with its cousins, Homonenderhalensis. The new species of human were discovered, the hobbits, and the Nisovans and floors in Siberia. And now these new people in a cave near Venice, in France. The long-admired Homo sapiens had started to seem less like the last word than merely one of nature's many shots at making humans. Talisa had first met Felix when Susan Kovalenko brought him around to her apartment one afternoon a year earlier. "I thought you two ought to meet," said Susan. There followed an hour of tea and chat before Susan remembered an appointment to see her sister downtown, leaving the two of them alone. So Susan had produced him, Talisa thought, like a conjurer plucking a card from her sleeve. He was a beautiful man, there was no denying that, with his loosely curled hair and expressive hands. He had the air of a musician whose symphony was not coming out quite right, yet he had broad shoulders and athletic movements. It seemed he was seldom off the tennis court. Alone together, they were both a little nervous and laughed at things that weren't funny. Then they listened to some music, where it turned out their tastes were very different. Felix managed to make this sound fascinating, as though it was obvious that their favorites ought to have been identical. He glanced along her bookshelf and asked some questions. Talisa squirmed a little, feeling he might be looking down on her lack of poetry, or European writing or something. Now that she saw them through his eyes, she had to admit there were a hell of a lot of books about Homo erectus. At least they were already one when it came to their passion for old movies, especially from the 90s. She offered him wine to follow the tea, but he opted for beer, and she found one at the back of the refrigerator. "Is this alright? I don't know much about beer." "It'll be fine." She levered off the cap and passed it over, pouring herself a glass of chilly old white wine at the same time. Afterwards, they went to a neighborhood Chinese restaurant. Everything seemed prearranged. They were destined to be together, and it was only a question of how they played it. Talisa had had only one proper boyfriend, and didn't know how to stop herself acquiring another. Nor did she want to. Over the next 2 weeks, they got together for lunchtime, walks, and early dinners. Talisa was still busy with her doctorate, but she checked her silent phone every minute, hoping for one of his proper but arousing messages. Felix worked for a small company that sold software to startups to help them rationalize their processes. Something like that, anyway, she told Susan Kovalenko. Felix said it was a stepping stone, just to make a little money while he put his game-changing plans in place. He already had some investors lined up for his own consultancy project. The exact nature of which was confidential. Meanwhile, he had a room in a brownstone off Park Slope with 2 women and their son. He did some child minding as part of the deal, and seemed not to mind this chore because he was confident that he would soon be rich and free. When Talisa finally invited Felix to stay over, she was in a state of uncontrolled excitement. She wanted to see the outline of his abdomen and how it flattened into the groin and the hips. She wanted him to hold on to her hard. When they came to it, he seemed so transported by excitement that she was fairly sure that some defects about which she was self-conscious, a lack of tone just here or there, a splash of pigment in an unexpected place, had escaped his notice. Instead, he whispered to her, explaining, asking her permission, and telling her how wonderful she was to him. He seemed to have sensed the things she had most privately desired, some of which she had not admitted to herself. In the daylight, fully dressed, she looked at him and knew that she had met her life's mate. It was ridiculous. She was too young, but there he was. He was so full of clarity and life. He was the other half of some entity that had been sundered in another world, in a time, she thought, before even the Paleolithic. And they were to meet again that evening. A week after her letter from the Helen Lingard Institute, Talisa had a quarterly bulletin from the Barn Institute in London. The establishment was funded by Lucas Barn, a young Australian-born tech billionaire who had become interested in genomics. Talisa was on the mailing list because she had been turned down for a position on a program that Barn funded at the University of London. Before finally unsubscribing, she glanced through the message. Among their new initiatives was a proposed study into the role of surrogate mothers in IVF. They had specific requirements of the surrogates they needed, further details on application. Intrigued, Talisa saw no harm in making some inquiries, from a point of scientific curiosity, at least. She was still turning the matter over in her head when she met Susan Kovalenko in a bar in Columbus, a place they had often hung out in as college students. "I know you don't like gimlets," said Susan, "so I got you an old-fashioned. Thought it would cheer you up." "Thanks, but I don't need a pishy-pashy." Talisa looked around the room. "You know we used to come here to get picked up." "Maybe you did." They had begun insulting each other as a way of mocking the tough girl talk in 9th grade, and the habit had stayed with them. It was at much the same time that one of the girls had christened Susan Kojak, after a long ago TV detective she'd watched with her grandpa on vintage repeats. Já tá ficando muito longo o vídeo, então eu vou parar por aqui. Eu espero que vocês tenham conseguido relaxar. Não esqueçam de deixar o like no vídeo e de se inscrever no canal, que a gente tá quase chegando a 25.000 inscritos. E eu quero fazer um vídeo bem legal pra comemorar quando a gente chegar em 25.000. Muito obrigada pela companhia. Bom descanso e bom soninho.